The White Sox could easily become a free agent destination with a new owner willing to spend money. However, improving in some other areas could also help draw premium talent to the South Side someday.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Well, I'm going to get to the Minor League Monday report to discuss how the team's prospects did during the final week of the Arizona Fall League, after I talk about how Josh Naylor is just the latest ideal free agent us White Sox fans have to watch not come to the South Side because of the team not being bold enough to even entertain luring him away. But first, let's discuss how the White Sox could even become a free agent destination in the first place beyond the simple stuff like new ownership that is willing to spend money. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. All right, so obviously, common knowledge, the simplest way the White Sox can become a free agent destination is just by simply spending more money in free agency. I mean, think about it. The White Sox and the A's are the only franchises to never hand out a $100 million deal, the going rate for premium talent. White Sox, A's, they share that in common of just being that cheap, that they won't pay the going rate for premium talent. Instead, the largest contract in free agent history for the White Sox is $78 million to Andrew Benintendi, who I would just say is a run-of-the-mill replacement level player, and lately he's not even been a replacement level player. And that's due in part to White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf's resistance to basically embrace baseball's modern economics. He still pines for those days of 1958 when Eddie Stanky was still, playing for the Dodgers as an indentured servant, based on the reserve clause and all that type of stuff. He's loathed, a competitor paying $20 million for a guy who hits 220, even though he probably has 40 home runs and all the other good sabermetrics number. He was alluding to probably Carlos Correa. And while we do have to wait until 2029 for the uber wealthy Justin Ishbia to buy controlling interest of the team and hope that he becomes the rich hobbyist owner that we all are dreaming of, you sometimes have to have more than just plenty of cash to compete for elite free agents. It's just a fact of life. I mean, think about how Alec Bregman, he chose Boston over Detroit, even though the Tigers offered him the most money and they were coming off a playoff appearance. Boston was not, but he just preferred the Boston organization. In his mind, they probably seemed more functional. He probably wanted the higher AAV instead of the long-term money and that type of stuff. And that is where sweepstakes usually involved, in the chase for free agents can come down to certain things on the margins to win those players' services. And that can even come down to the bargain bin free agents that were even just hoping that the White Sox shop in figuratively in free agency this year. And unfortunately, right now, the White Sox, I don't think would be able to make up much ground to attract a free agent over the next couple of off seasons that would hopefully put them over the top if this rebuild works. Because that's, again, when you want to use free agency, you want to plug holes in areas where you don't have a long-term solution within your organization, or that long-term solution is that A-ball, you just need to bridge the gap. You want to use free agency, obviously, for depth. I mean, again, look at how the Dodgers operate. They use free agency and even the trade market. They use free agency that way. And then obviously you want to use free agency to acquire those players that put you over the top. Again, like the Dodgers getting Shohei Ohtani. They kept not winning a lot of World Series. Suddenly they've won back-to-back because they went out and got one of the best players in baseball. That's usually when you want to use free agency. Or like when the Cubs got John Lester. And right now, it just feels like the only thing the White Sox can even sell, and that would only basically to be to scrap heap free agents and maybe the lower tier of the bargain bin, and even just to waiver wires guys as well. I got to have bats and innings because they don't really have, the promise of playoff baseball or winning. And sometimes even those bargain bin guys like Teoscar Hernandez signs with the Dodgers in 2024 for a one-year deal because he knows he can compete for a championship. White Sox can't sell that. They can't even sell the chance to play with great players right now. They can't even sell the chance to possibly still be great, developed into a great player. If you're even a guy looking for a bounce back, it just really hasn't happened. right now, the White Sox are lacking in a lot of those areas. And plus, they probably still have to make up ground for the dysfunction that came out in all those reports after the 2023 and 2024 season. So they have to start showing that this is a functional organization under GM Chris Getz and manager Will Venable. And the reason I bring this up is Bleacher Report's Zachary Reimer. He recently ranked all 30 MLB teams as free agent destinations. He put them, basically into his formula of looking at like the payroll situation, a contention window, and quality of life in the city. And then he ranked it 1 through 30. And the White Sox, though, surprisingly, did not come in dead last. So for those that are constantly scrutinizing the White Sox and owner Jerry Reinsdorf, they are not the least desirable team, according to at least Zachary Reimer of Bleacher Report. Although when he was looking at quality of life, he took into account attendance as part of quality of life. And look, I'm sure players love playing in front of big crowds, but they're usually motivated when you're looking at quality of life on things like tax situations, cost of living, even schools, if their kids are going to be there during the season. When it comes to cities, that type of stuff. And think about this too. The Rays, they don't draw and they still win. And they can at least attract a bargain bin free agent here and there. And also the Cubs, they draw well, and he still didn't even have him in his top 5. I would put attendance more into the payroll, just a critique, because that's what drives revenue. That's where you can get revenue streams. And currently the White Sox, they got to close that gap too. They got to get better in finding more revenue streams, whether it's having a new stadium in place when Justin Ishbia is ready to take over, or just an idea to develop more revenue streams to help fund a better payroll. Maybe developing the parking lots around right field, creating Comiskeyville, kind of like, again, what the Cubs did with Gallagher Way. Although I think the Cubs are claiming poverty because of that. But anyways, the White Sox were still in the bottom 5. They came in at number 26, ahead of only the Twins, Cardinals, Rockies, and Nationals. And this is what he writes about the payroll, the contention window, and quality of life. White Sox GM Chris Getz has all but promised he won't be signing any free agents to multi-year deals, so fans should adjust their expectations accordingly. If anything, it'll be a surprise if their 2026 opening day payroll matches what they spent in 2025. The White Sox have endured 100-plus losses in each of the last 3 seasons, and they're still in the early stages of establishing a core to build around. To this end, Colson Montgomery and Kyle Teel look like strong cornerstones. White Sox fans will show up if the team is good, but that won't be the case for another year or two. And while Chicago's relatively favorable financial environment for free agents, that only matters so much if the White Sox are only doing one-year deals. And while the one-year deals actually do make sense this offseason, at some point the franchise has to get back to handing out multi-year deals. And my hope is they hand them to players that helps put them over the top if this rebuild goes according to plan. And to draw them in, if you want to beat them on the margins, it would be nice if Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teel, Edgar Caro, Shane Smith, even Grant Taylor continue to ascend. It would be very helpful if Braden Montgomery, Noah Schultz, and Hagen Smith become studs once they arrive. Basically, the White Sox need elite players, as that's a great way to draw more elite players. I mean, yes, free agents flock to the Dodgers and the Yankees because of the money they can offer, but it also helps when you got someone like Aaron Judge already there that can help you stay competitive. I mean, the Angels once had Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani to help draw in free agents, and they never won a playoff game with how terrible their front office was. But you still need to have elite players. So you got to have a capable organization that can not only develop elite talent, but then identify the correct contracts to hand out. Maybe don't pay Anthony Rendon, And right now, we don't know if the Getz administration can be that. I mean, he's modernized the front office. He's very good at recruiting leaders like Will Venable, Josh Barfield, Ryan Fuller, Brian Bannister. These are front office wins, but at some point you want to see him start recruiting great players. Can he do that? Obviously it's going to need payroll, as I've said, but you got to go back to improving in the margins. And I think also this organization has to change that narrative that they're dysfunctional. And right now I'd rate them as inconsistent. I mean, you saw Martin Perez love it here when he was healthy. Mike Tauchman was a professional, but they also got to show, can they develop and enhance talent? I mean, Josh Rojas was not able to revive his career. Nicky Lopez was not able to do that here. So they got to be able to do all that type of stuff. And we know current owner Jerry Reinsdorf, he's not opening his wallet up much. And that's why this club had no chance of signing Josh Naylor to be the first baseman for the next 5 years. So let's discuss how his staying in Seattle is just another reason to be frustrated with this team after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, over-unders, and spreads, but if you want to win some big-time money, or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. The NBA Cup Championship game is just about a month away. If you think Cleveland is going to win it all, they're at plus 800. So even putting as little as $5 on that and it hitting will pay out $40. Think Milwaukee could win the NBA Cup 2 years in a row? Well, they're at plus 1900. So $5 on that. And if it does happen, that pays out $95. And if you think Luka can win the regular season MVP, and I saw him on Saturday night, he definitely looks like he can do it. He's at plus 500. So let's say you put $10 on that and it does happen. Well, that would pay out $50. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you can get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe out wherever you get your audio podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. So I know Josh Naylor was never going to sign with the White Sox. I mean, I'm realistic. And one reason just became very clear because he clearly wanted to stay in Seattle, as he's reportedly signing a 5-year deal to return to the team that he was traded to after the deadline. And the reason why it looks like he definitely wanted to stay in Seattle is normally a premium free agent like him doesn't sign until probably the winter meetings. You know, that's when you really want to get the juice or the heat, get those bidding wars going. That's usually when they make those signings, or at least a little bit before the winter meetings, or even sometimes after. So I think that's the clearest sign that him re-upping this early in free agency means he wanted to stay with the Mariners. However, we can still look at things in the big picture context. And I get frustrated that the White Sox were likely not even going to be in the sweepstakes at all for a few reasons. Even if Naylor was like, you know what, I am going to shop around. The White Sox were not going to be in the Josh Naylor sweepstakes, which to me is basically, I do think, is organizational negligence. And one of the reasons why I get frustrated is it speaks to, again, how this owner keeps placing self-imposed salary caps on the front office. It also speaks to the very limited amount of money being spent to upgrade the roster for an owner who especially once claimed that he wanted to turn things around quickly and then denies basically the one route that you can only turn a team around quickly by actually cutting payroll. And the third is, again, it's another elite free agent that would have just fit in perfectly on the White Sox, not coming to Chicago for basically a variety of reasons that I probably outlined in the first segment. And fourth, I mean, again, you just can't really dare to dream that the White Sox could be involved in getting great players. I mean, that's what this boils down to. I mean, it seems like it just keeps being this cycle of ever since 2021 where you think, okay, like especially 2022 was like, hey, Corey Seager and Marcus Semien are right there, especially Marcus Semien. He would have been perfect for the White Sox to keep the contention window going. And I don't even know if they made it a realistic offer. And that's just what you can't keep daring to dream. Part of me does, but then it's like, again, you just know that he's not coming here. That guy's not coming here. And again, you had an owner that laughed at the idea of even picking up the phone to see if Shohei Ohtani would be interested. I mean, just laugh. We're not going to be in any Ohtani sweepstakes, huh? You don't laugh at that. I mean, you could say, hey, I doubt he would ever come here and be realistic, but you still pick up the phone. Just like they still made a presentation to Roki Sasaki last offseason. You at least give it a shot. Because what's the worst? I mean, it's like asking the pretty girl out to homecoming. Shoot your shot. She says no. Well, it's not the end of the world. That type of stuff. And I keep saying, like, I'm fine again with the White Sox payroll being on the lower side right now because it does make sense to see if those pre-arb players can be the core of the next competitive team. It does make sense to say, hey, Colson Montgomery's 23 years old. He's got a high ceiling. Let's see if he can hit it. Or Kyle Teel. Because again, you get the club control in their peak performance years. So I get it. And when you got a lot of pre-arb guys that you're trying out and that have shown some potential, you're going to have a lot of cheap contracts. I mean, just by nature, you're going to have a smaller payroll because they are, I think, in the right path of, hey, let's see what these guys can do. But what I don't like is this lack of spending on positions where you don't have a pre-arb solution like first base. They don't have somebody that you can say in the organization, at least at AA or above, that you could say, that's our first baseman of the future. And technically in the outfield, maybe you got a center fielder or right fielder, just depending on where you put Braden Montgomery. But after that, then you don't have that true guy of the future. I'm sorry. Brooks Baldwin, maybe he might be the next Ben Zobrist, but he also might just be another Larry Garcia. And that's not a guy that you want to be rolling out every single day. And when there's premium talent who would fit your offseason needs and what you're looking for and would fit this team perfectly, left-handed bat, decent power, decent fielder, hits tremendous at right field, runs the bases surprisingly well. Team doesn't jump at the chance. Doesn't even look at, hey, let's see if he's willing to come here because he's raked here. I mean, my buddy Bez, I saw that tweet on on Twitter at Bez Beyond the Pen. He tweeted like, just expect him to hit 2 or 3 home runs when the Mariners play the White Sox. And I'm expecting him to hurt me because that's what he does. He hurts the White Sox, plays well at Guaranteed Field. And did I mention that there's not many options at first base long-term in the organization? So 5 years would have been great. Well, maybe 3, but still. I mean, he just would have been a good solution because the only possibilities that I can think of right now, like even within the organization, is maybe you move Caleb Bonemer over to first, since if everything does go to chalk in terms of the development, you're going to ideally have Billy Carlson at short, not Bonemer or Colson. You're probably going to move Colson over to third. I mean, you could also move Colson to first. He is tall enough, and maybe Caleb. But, that's really your options. And Bonemer's probably 2 years away. So it's not like, hey, he's going to be ready to go on opening day of when you're hopefully being more competitive in 2027. And even then, the organization just didn't seem inclined to, and they don't seem inclined to want to try a lot of these prospects out at different positions. I think Bonemer's going to be playing shortstop again at high A. They don't seem to be inclined to be like, hey, let's try out. Like, again, you've got these glut of infielders. And at some point, you want to be like, why aren't you trying William Bergoya out in the outfield or Jarrell Perez in the outfield? At some point, there has to be a different path for some of these guys. And there was a chance to get a 28-year-old first baseman for a couple of years, and the team just sat it out. And it would be nice for once to think, hey, this club is going to do what it takes to put the necessary resources into areas where they have needs, where there's really no long-term solution in the organization. They're going to spend the cash, and it just doesn't happen. Instead, it's Band-Aid after Band-Aid after Band-Aid solution. One reason why it's taken forever to replace Ray Durham or Jermaine Dye. And it's constantly sitting out sweepstakes that could yield a contributing piece if they won the signing. And it just gets so tiring. Although I love this little nugget from Jim Margulis of SoxMachine.com. He wrote this about Naylor signing. Naylor appeared 4 times in the offseason plan project and probably would have been listed more often if the White Sox showed any inclination to make major investments this winter. The proposed contracts averaged out to an $18.87 million annual salary, which is $94.3 million over a 5-year term, even if our 4 GMs were only willing to go 4 years at most. The White Sox probably dodged a bullet less because Naylor's profile is pumpkin-shaped, and more because if he were indeed designed to take special pleasure in destroying the White Sox, signing a franchise record contract and doing nothing for it would have been a devastating final act. Well, the Arizona Fall League wrapped up its season last week. Let's go over how the White Sox prospects playing in the league did, and that's coming up after the break. NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans, cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. And the app made it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before buying. I can attest that. I was doing that on Saturday when I did go to the Bucs game. You best believe I was using the Game Time app. Got a great, view from my seat, knowing, hey, I'm going to get a good view from this ticket that I'm buying. And I love zone deals too. Pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save big. And honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox over to get their podcast, as this show's available on all major podcast platforms. Hope you had a good weekend. I did take in the Bucks-Lakers game on Saturday night. Watched Luka absolutely destroy Milwaukee. It was basically, at one point it did become, kind of what you want to see out of an NBA game. Two superstars going at it, of Luka and Giannis, and they were putting on a show. Problem is, for the Bucks, not anyone else was putting on a show. But I will say, I can't believe a team traded Luka Doncic in his prime. That's just still baffling and mystifying. So if you ever think Chris Getz does something that can frustrate you, just remember, just in general, he still has not traded a superstar in his prime for a terrible return. He has traded Garrett Crochet and even Dylan Cease, but in Garrett Crochet, that looks like it's going to be mutually beneficial. Where trading for AD, a guy who's always hurt, that just was wow. Anyways, hope you had a good weekend. Some family was in town too that I went to the Bucks game with, my nephew and my brother-in-law from LA. So had a good time. He's got some family in the area too, my brother-in-law, so hung out with them too. So it was a fun time. So again, hope you had a great weekend. Well, the White Sox got a great overall performances from the players, from the prospects that you basically wanted to have in the Arizona Fall League. You wanted Sam Atanachi, Braden Montgomery, and Hagen Smith to put on a show in the Arizona Fall League, and that's what they did. However, remember, it is just the Arizona Fall League. It's a very small sample size of extra play in a hitter-friendly environment. So don't get too carried away or don't get too hyped up that, hey, these three guys that could be potential big league contributors, and in the case of Smith and Braden Montgomery, could actually be, frontline superstar players. It's just the Arizona Fall League. It's just basically extra reps. Because remember, Adam Engel was an Arizona Fall League stud once. Colson Montgomery, he had a great AFL last year and still struggled to start the minor league season. In fact, he had to go back to Arizona to just work out at the White Sox spring training facility to even revive any hopes that he could be somewhat good. And obviously it worked because he hit 21 home runs in 71 games. And really what you want to hope for is Braden Montgomery, Sam Atanashi, and Hagen Smith. They use this really good Arizona Fall League as a springboard to have a promising spring training and then a solid to great start in the minors during the first couple of months of this, of the season. And then hopefully they're on the big league team by mid-2026. And in the case of Caden Connor, he did at least show that there could be some utility potential for him in the outfield next season, or even at first base, as he can play there a little bit. I will say this, the prospects who did struggle, like Ryan Galaney and pitchers Tyler Davis and, Gerald Rosado, on one end, I wouldn't get too worried that they struggled, especially the pitchers, as it's a 6-week mini season. It's very hitter friendly. Although Galaney, for him to cool off, he missed a huge opportunity to make an impression for big league consideration, kind of like Connor did. At least Caden Connor, kind of gave off the vibes that even if it's just a utility player, like, hey, this guy could probably play in the majors. I don't know how great he's going to be, but Galaney really struggling, that was kind of a disappointment in a little bit. I think he was the only one where I would say, okay, because especially he got off to a hot start and then just really, really cooled off. Now, in terms of production at the plate, Chicago White Sox on SI's Jack Ankeny. He's got a nice recap on there. And in terms of like the last couple of games, Braden Montgomery, obviously he had a couple of rockets that he hit. And it was really good, though, to see Braden put up the numbers that he did. And had he played in a few more games to get the at-bats necessary for consideration to be, a qualified batter to be considered like the official leader, he would have led the Desert Dogs in OPS with a 1.161, and he would have led the Desert Dogs in slug, 634, and on-base percentage at 527. And he did end up hitting 366 with a homer, 13 walks to 12 strikeouts in 41 official bats. So you got to love that. But he just didn't have the at-bats to, considered when you're doing like the qualified sorting. He wasn't in the qualified because he played only 12 games and had only 40 at-bats. I think, he would have had to play a few more games and probably get to 60 at-bats for consideration. But instead, it's Sam Antonacci who led all qualified batters in OPS for the Desert Dogs with a 1.046 in 74 at-bats. So that's really encouraging. He went 28 for 74, had 3 doubles, 3 home runs, 14 RBIs, 24 runs, 15 walks, only struck out 11 times, 11 stolen bases. His final slash line was 378, 505, 541. And I love this quote from Antonacci that Ankeny got. And this is the quote, "I don't really want to be known as a good fall league player. I want to be known as a productive big leaguer that brings a championship here to Chicago," Antonacci said. "But it's obviously better than not succeeding here. But like I said, there's a lot of work to be done to get to where I want to be," end quote. And for him to get to where he wants to be, the first thing is, I think that I will say this, the pressure is probably on Chase Maedroff next season to prove he can be that good bat to ball hitter. Because if he struggles or hits like, say, again, 230 to 250, and Antonacci's hitting well again in the minors because he had a good season at high A and then at double A, I think the White Sox will have to consider him maybe their long-term solution at second base. And that's where you think you want to put him because, again, he's got some sneaky pop, but not a ton of pop. Probably would hit like 10 home runs. But again, if he's got a little bit more pop than Maedroff, and if he can show that he's got better bat-to-ball skills, he might be the guy that you want to roll with as the everyday first baseman if he can show it, if given the opportunity. Caden Connor, he went 23 for 64, 2 doubles, did not hit a home run, 10 RBIs, 15 runs, 18 walks, 9 strikeouts, 8 stolen bases, 359, 494, 391 slash line, and that's good for an 885 OPS. Obviously would have liked to see him hit more home runs in the AFL, but, definitely put up some impressive numbers to make you think, okay, there could be something there, even if it's in the utility role. Then Galaney, he finished 11 for 52, just 1 double, no home runs, 9 RBIs, 5 runs, 9 walks, 13 Ks, 3 stolen bases. His final slash line was 212, 362, 231. And he posted a rough 593. Pitching-wise, though, Hagen Smith had a good run in a hitter-friendly environment. Pitches 14 innings, 7 hits, 4 earned runs that he gave up, only 1 home run allowed, 2 hit by pitch, 6 walks, 21 Ks, 2.57 ERA, a .093 whip. That is exactly what you want to see out of last year's first-round pick after he had such a shaky first full year in the minors. Command was just such an issue, so I love seeing that he had a .93 whip, especially in such a hitter-advantaged league. And again, I think what this did is this does revive hopes that he can still be a very good starting pitcher, but he has to show that same command that he just showed in dominance in the first few months of the season next year, I think, to really earn that midseason call-up. Otherwise, the rest of the pitchers there, Connor McCullough, he had a 12.79 ERA. Tyler Davis, 7.59 ERA. Geraldo Rosado, a 12.15 ERA. And then Carson Jacobs, a 4.50 ERA. Tyler Davis is probably the one on the list that you could say maybe could be a big league reliever someday. Did have some inconsistent performances, but again, it's a hitter-friendly league. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with your mailbag questions and comments. So make sure to get them in via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, or leave them on X, formerly Twitter, @LockedOnSox. You can also leave comments about today's episode on the episode page on YouTube via email, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, or X for me, Twitter, @LockedOnSox or @TajDub. Also, make sure to like today's episode on YouTube. Leave a 5-star review at wherever you get your podcasts. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever you get your audio-only podcast. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.